Welcome to the Northern Affinity video podcast. During this session, we will be having an unedited discussion with an expert. And what I'll be planning to do is during our discussion, get them to teach me something. Teach me about something that's of interest, but also they are an expert in. I'm Michael Edwards and I'm the founder of the Northern Affinity. And I will tap into our wonderful community to bring you along on my drive for self-improvement and my desire to learn. So please connect with me on various social media platforms, whether it's LinkedIn or Instagram or Twitter. And I'd love to hear from you what subjects you'd like to learn more about, or what subjects you think it'd be good for me to learn about. So please, get in contact and let me know. All the details will be in the show notes, and you can send me an email or contact me via the various platforms. I really hope you enjoy the show. Right, welcome to the latest episode of the Northern Affinity podcast, video and podcast, should I say, more accurately. I'm delighted today we're going to talk about how to conduct a great discovery meeting, and I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by Pete Evans from SalesStar, and SalesStar are experts in sales transformation in the briefest of brief summaries. So welcome, Pete.
Yeah, delighted to be here, Michael, again, being interviewed by yourself on your great podcast series. And I think you've articulated very well what we do. So just for the benefit of the people watching and listening, I'm the MD of SalesStar in the UK, and we're a global sales transformation business, working with businesses, as you say, to transform sales performance through coaching, strategy, and really embedding change in the mindset of salespeople and sales leaders and sales managers, both in the UK, locally and globally.
Fantastic, Pete. And I know of all the great work that you're doing at the moment in various different business, like you said, locally, but also all over the place. Pete's often seen jet setting all around the world. Just come back from New Zealand, is that right, Pete?
Yes, I attended the first Global Partners Conference of SalesStar that took place in Auckland. I would say that it was work, but you got to watch the All Blacks play Australia, which was a bucket list thing I wanted to do for years. And then we, myself and some of the team, went down to Queenstown for a week, sightseeing, cycling, running, and eating as well. So yeah, had a fantastic time. Still suffering a little bit with the jet lag, but get back into the swing of life in the UK now.
I can imagine, Pete. I can imagine. So, obviously, we today was all about. There's a million different areas of sales that we could talk about. But we're going to really focus on the discovery meeting, the first kind of initial contact for businesses with a potential prospect. So, I guess my first question is, why is it important? Why do we need to make sure this works well?
It's a great question to start with, Michael, and it's a question we often get asked. I think, there's various ways that you can generate leads, through referrals, through being involved in, networks like Northern Affinity, lead generation campaigns through LinkedIn, Google AdWords. There's all sorts of ways of generating leads. And I know from your own experience, when you start a business and you get an inquiry, you're so enthusiastic and you arrange the meeting with a prospect. And the temptation is you just show up and throw up with your standard presentation. But what we do know, and I think this has become more relevant particularly in a recession, because more and more people are trying to squeeze you on price. They want more for the buck. So actually, having a great discovery meeting is so essential, because it's your opportunity to listen to the prospect, uncover their needs. There's a research that's been done which shows that over 80% of buying decisions are emotional. So unless the buyer of your products or services has an emotional connection with the problem which you're looking to solve, the sale isn't really going to go ahead. So actually, a great discovery meeting leads to a great presentation and ultimately increases your chances of actually winning the deal. The last thing is that it's your opportunity to differentiate yourself from the competition. How often have people tried to sell to you, Michael? And it's just like a download from them, and you come away thinking, they've tried to sell me something, but they've never asked me any questions about my business.
No,
And they haven't done the research. So I think that's why it's so important. It's a key part of any great sales process is having a great discovery meeting. And sometimes in sales style, we refer to it as a triage call, because what you're doing is you're doing an initial diagnosis, and the discovery call is also a way of qualifying out prospects as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk a little bit later actually about kind of how you hold these kind of logistics, if you like, whether in person, online, phone, and how they all differ.
Yeah.
But I think it's really interesting there what you mentioned about, I guess, the current economic situation. You know, we sat here on the 6th of October 2022, and it's quite a turbulent time, and there's recessions and various other financial things going on at the moment. So I assume that from your experience, this is more, it's always been relevant. It's always important to do it well, but even more relevant than ever before right now to get this right.
Well, I mean, I know, Michael, that you're a lot younger than me, but, you know, I've lived personally through a number of recessions. And the one thing that I do know from working with clients over the years is that when the market is rising and the economy is strong, it's easy to sell. And you'll have a lot of small businesses listening to this podcast as well, where, you know, they may well have experienced, you know, quite a few years of high growth. It's been easy to sell their products and services. They've not really had to sell. So in essence, they've been an order taker. But in a recession, it really sorts people out, because in a recession, you know, the one thing we know is in a recession, whether you're a small business owner, whether you're a salesperson, you know, whether you're a sales manager leading a sales team, you've got to get better at selling. And discovery is a key part of that process, because you can differentiate yourself. And particularly when there's pressures on margins, which there are, you know, energy prices are going up. There's interest rates are going up. So, you know, the fixed costs of running a business are increasing. So people are looking to squeeze you when you're selling to them. And a lot of us talk about selling value. Well, you create the value in the discovery meeting, because you uncover the client's pain and how motivated they are to take action.
I was just thinking that, Pete, it's probably worthwhile doing kind of taking a step back as such.
Yeah.
You know, you mentioned there about selling, and then you talked about people taking orders. So I guess it'd be really interesting to define what selling is. And I know obviously it'd be very different for every business, and it all depending on what it is. But you know, I know you'll agree with me. A lot of experience of, especially people who, you know, single owner businesses who need to sell their product. They don't often see it as selling, even though they are. So it'd be quite interesting to kind of maybe the definition, the differences in your eyes between those two scenarios.
Well, it's interesting, because we, in our process and what we teach our clients, we talk about the principle of consultative selling.
Yeah.
And there are many different definitions if you search on Google about consultative selling. But what, you know, one of the things that we we talk about when we talk about a definition of consultative selling can be enhancing customer profits or reducing costs. So actually, you know, is your product or service going to add value? Is it going to have a positive impact on the person or the company you're selling to? So if you think about it from that perspective, selling is actually, you know, enhancing your customer's profit or reducing cost. Is it?
And I guess that's where the emotion comes, isn't it? Because whilst you know, you're talking numbers there, when it comes to people's businesses, that is an emotional reaction to save money or make more money, essentially.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting, you know, you talk about things. So what we talk about in terms of discovery, and some of this is sort of pre-discovery when we're ringing people up, or if people say to me, "Oh, so what is it you do?" So we use something which we call a positioning statement, and we use the positioning statement when we're calling prospects up, or when we meet somebody at a networking event, whether online or face to face. I don't say we sell sales transformation. I say we work with CEOs and managing directors of businesses who are typically concerned about the impact of the recession on their sales team's ability to sell value. So that's what I'm doing is I'm positioning our business and the types of people we want to deal with, but we will and what some of the pain points are. So frustrated is an emotional reaction to a challenge, to a problem that they've got. When we're selling business to business products or business to business services, there's got to be an emotional reaction.
Yeah.
And you've got to, in the discovery meeting, you've got to really dig deep to find what the client's pain point is, because then they're going to have an emotional connection with that pain point, and they're more likely to buy. If there isn't any emotional connection with the pain, the research shows they're less likely to purchase from you. And I think we can all think of circumstances where we've been ghosted by prospects.
Yeah.
It's because they've not felt the connection. There isn't enough pain.
And I guess it's important to say that a lot of times the potential customer doesn't actually know what they might think they know what their pain point is, but actually the skill of that is asking the right questions, getting to the point, and to find out in more detail. It might be obvious. Again, it depends on what service and product you offer, but sometimes it's not always obvious. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, and I think this is the interesting thing when we talk about operating in a recession, and lots of small business owners think that they don't sell. Even post COVID, we've been in a rising market where it's been relatively easy, in inverted commas, to sell. Actually, most people have been taking orders. Now it's getting more difficult. So actually, what you've got to do is position yourself as the expert or the consultant, but it's about asking great questions and sufficient questions. You've really got to create the tension in the meeting. Somebody once said to me, well, what's tension? I said, it's about looking at the prospect and seeing whether they're sort of squirming, they're feeling a bit uncomfortable on the chair, because then they're actually recognizing they've got a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And actually what you need to do is to quantify how big that problem is. But I think what you see is a lot of people, when they're selling, they get very stuck into what we call situational questions. And situational questions are questions, for example, how much you're turning over, what is your gross profit margin, what's your net profit margin, what's your average sale value, what are your plans for growth? Where do you see yourself in 12 months? So they're what we call, salespeople, business owners tend to be quite good at asking situational questions.
Yeah.
But what they're not very good at is asking tension questions and an impact question. So what really is the effect of that problem? Michael, you said that this year, your target for revenue was £1 million. You think you're only going to be at £8 million. Sorry, at £800,000. So there's a £200,000 shortfall in your budget. Michael, tell me more about how that's going to impact you. What's the effect? So what you're doing is you've gone through the tension and you're starting to really.
I felt a bit awkward. You're just asking me that, then, Pete. I felt like squirming in my seat.
Yeah, but that's what you've got to do, and what you're doing there is you're creating that emotional connection with the problem. So you're able to quantify the problem. But what a lot of people do when they're selling is that they do show up and throw up. So they're so keen to present their ready-made solution. And it's interesting because somebody might make an inquiry, and let's say you're I don't know, your wife Gemma runs So Contented, a content marketing company. Somebody might ring them up and say, hey, we want some blog postings writing. And it'd be very easy for Gemma and Helen just to say, yeah, we'll write you, 10 blog posts a month. But actually, that might not be the real problem.
No.
So actually, what you've got to do in their case is, I'm just using them as an example, is sort of step back and say, so Pete, first of all, what we'd like to understand is, let's understand more about your business. How, tell us, how do you generate inquiries? What marketing do you do? Where do you see some of the challenges? Why is it you want to invest in blog posts? And then you're getting what you're doing is by asking great questions and the right questions, is you're getting a much deeper understanding of the client's potential problems and the opportunity to upsell. Because most clients don't wake up in the morning and go, hey, we really need to transform sales performance.
No.
Or they might think they want a bit of sales training, but actually that's not really going to fix the problem. So it's really important to understand what the problem is, and you're creating that emotional connection in that first meeting. You're almost, somebody said to me, you're almost getting them on a bit of a high point where they can really see the problem and they can understand the effect of not taking any action. It's got to mean something to them personally, and it's got to mean something to them in the business.
It was really interesting there. You used the example of the blogs. So if someone said to you, I want 10 blogs a month, and the example you used there was, well, why? Do you think a lot of people will shy away from that question because they're worried essentially going to lose the order as you kind of go into the order taker type idea, where actually what could come from it would be a full rewrite of the website, new brochure, or whatever that is. That would be the question that starts that process. Do you think there's a little bit of fear from people? Is, if I ask them why, they might actually turn around and say, "Well, actually, we don't need it."
Yeah, I think there is a fear, because actually we've been in this order taking environment now, for a few years. Markets have been rising. It's been easier to win work, and obviously, when you're running a business, as you know, there are pressures on cash flow. So if somebody rings up and says, "Hey, we want 10 blog posts writing a month," you might be sat there thinking, "We really need this order," but actually, one of our core values as a business in Sales Style is doing things for the right reasons. So actually, what the client or the prospect is asking for may not solve their problem. So when you're trying to differentiate yourself, a great way to really frame it to say, Michael, your initial inquiry is about writing 10 blog posts, but one of the things that we want to understand is that the right thing that you need to be doing as a business at this moment in time? So what I'd like to do today, Michael, is spend 30 minutes asking you some questions about the business. And then at the end of it, I'll be able to tell you whether what we do and our services, whether they're right for you. And if they're not, I'll also tell you that. And the discovery meeting is also about framing yourself and making the other person feel comfortable that they're in a safe pair of hands.
Yeah, and I guess there's the idea as well, as if you're taking the order of 10 blog posts, then if that's not actually what they need, even if we do, that's only ever going to be short-term work, because they're probably not going to get the best out of them blog posts. However good the posts are, if everything else isn't aligned, if all the other right questions haven't been asked, it's only going to have a relatively limited benefit as a business. So actually, what you are doing them a favor by asking the deeper questions, and yourself a favor, because it's more likely to turn out to longer sustained business.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting these days. Lots of businesses talk about the values and being aligned with their clients, and I know it's a piece of work that Gemma and the team did for for myself when my business was Ventus before we set up the joint venture with SalesStar. And Gemma did a lot of work around values and the importance of values. And I think one of the things we do is to say, look, actually, we'll decide whether we want to work with you as a business. There's got to be an alignment of values. If you're just taking people's money because it's easy to get that business, you're not going to create long-term value with our clients. And they're going to view you as a supplier, and it's going to be a transaction to them and a transaction to you. Lots of people talk about trusted advisor status, but they don't start their sales process as trusted advisors. So actually stepping backwards and having the confidence to say, look, if that is the right thing for us to do, we'll tell you that. But to start with, we need to really understand your business, and understanding business when you're selling is so important. Understanding the decision-making process. So you might have made the initial inquiry in your business, but you may not be the person who ultimately takes the decision. So what I've also got to understand in the discovery meeting is, what is the decision making process, who you're talking to. So sometimes you are in competition. Also, a great question to ask in a discovery meeting is, so Michael, I know you're looking, for example, just coming back to, So Contented as an example. I know you're making an inquiry about marketing and content, content marketing. Well, what other things are you considering investing in as well as this? Because the marketing aspect could be just one thing that you're looking at. So and the other question to ask as well in a discovery meeting is, so is this a now or later thing? And how many times have people they'll probably, some people in Northern Finnish might say, I had a great meeting with Pete the other day. And then if it was, I can't get a hold of Pete, or he's completely ghosting me. Not that I do that, by the way, but and I'm sure you've experienced this in sales. And they're blaming the prospect. It's probably because they didn't ask that question of how important is it? And is it a now or later thing? And here's something else about the discovery meeting. We always say to a prospect, so Michael, on a scale of 1 to 10, how motivated are you to take action? And if they're not a 9, we'll say to them, well, realistically at this stage, there isn't any value in putting a proposal together for you. They might say, well, I'm a 7. And so, well, actually, we only work with 9s or 10s. I know I'm a 9. Well, what has changed? Because if you think about it, investing time in writing a proposal is valuable time. And if they're not going to be motivated to take a decision in the next meeting, you're actually wasting your time. You may as well spend your time sort of talking to your mates. Yeah. And that might sound a little bit brutal, but I think that is the brutal reality of it.
No, I think some great points, Peter. And one thing I was thinking about when you mentioned that then is, I think for some people, maybe listening or watching this, they probably would feel maybe a little bit awkward asking some of these questions, a bit uncomfortable. And now I know something that you are big on is practicing.
Yes.
Is role playing and things like that. So
yeah.
Whilst I don't think anyone particularly enjoys doing those type of situations, but the benefit is, it's like anything, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And obviously good practice is better than bad practice, which is obvious, but how important is it for people to, it might just be someone and you can kind of practice with each other a little bit of asking those questions that you might feel a bit awkward about, but it's easier doing it with someone you trust and doing that first few times before you're doing it in essentially real life. Yeah, how big a big thing is that?
I think it's a big challenge for people, role players, and it's interesting because on our own podcast we interviewed Kevin Beals, who's the founder of Refract, which is a conversation intelligence platform that some of our clients use, and Refract obviously sold out to a leg on it. And Kevin and I were discussing this issue of role players, and we thoroughly believe that the vast majority of people don't practice. So actually, if you're not practicing, you're practicing on your customers and your prospects. And I think one of the really key things you've got to do is, how expensive is that to practice on your prospects? And what was interesting, and I'm going to link this back to the trip to New Zealand. So we had the opportunity to listen to Sir Graham Henry, who is probably the best All Blacks coach ever. And one of the things they talk about in New Zealand is the it's the mental skills, and it's the red head and the blue head principle. And one of the things they talk about is preparing for those difficult or challenging moments in a match, because actually, if you don't practice and you're not in that mental zone and you haven't got that mental toughness, when your prospect asks you a difficult question or a question you haven't thought about, and you just got no idea, and you lose credibility. So personally, practice is so important, and it comes across. It comes across when you're doing your discovery meeting, when you're doing your presentation. And I think actually, if you are going to role play with people, get your friend or your colleague to make it be tough on you. Because your prospects are tough as well.
I guess that's the thing. If you know, let's say me and you were practicing some like a discovery meeting. Sorry, if I said to you, Pete, be as harsh as possible on me, whilst it might be uncomfortable and probably wouldn't particularly enjoy it. Once that's done, then the likelihood is actually it's probably never going to be any more difficult than that. It's probably the hardest situation. So, like you said, being in that situation in that scenario doesn't kind of matter if you essentially fall to pieces and start crying in a corner like I probably would be. But if you can get through that, then probably you're going to be absolutely fine in every other scenario.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm sort of keen on sports psychology, and I'm sort of keen on running. I know that you ran a marathon last year. One of my friends did the London Marathon on Sunday, and myself and a couple of friends sort of trained with her. And the longest distance I ran was 20 miles. And you know, one of my friends said to me, "But you're doing the Great North Run. That's 13.1 miles. Why would you run 20 miles?" I said, I wanted to see from a mindset perspective what's involved, you know, in running for 4 hours. Because I said I wanted to see what goes on in my mind. I said, but the other thing as well is, I said, it gives me an experience I can bank on. And instantly, the Great North Run was great. You know, 60,000 people, probably too many for a run. But when I got to 11 miles, I was getting severe cramp in my calves, and I was I think I was a little bit dehydrated. But I think if I hadn't done all that running beforehand, I wouldn't have had the mental toughness to run the last 2 miles. I would have just sort of given up. And I think it's the same with this, is that when you're selling, and just coming back to the discovery meeting, let alone the presentation meeting, the fact that you've banked that experience when it comes to a real life environment, you know, you've got that memory bank, and you can go, well, actually, when I was doing that role play, this happened, and this is how I responded. And you don't cave in. So that's why it's so important for the role plays to be, you know, like real, but for somebody to really raise some objections, because then you can handle it. And when you practice something, you get better at it.
Do you know what, Pete? I think that mental side of things, you know, weirdly enough, of that very similar situation to what you mentioned there, I experienced myself recently with running. So as you quite rightly mentioned, I did the marathon like about a year ago now. I haven't run really for 11 months, knee injury and all that kind of stuff. I've barely done any cardio, ate lots of chocolate and sweets, and that's it. Went out for a run recently, the first time in 11 months, and I ran 10K. I think if you'd have asked me to do that 2-3 years ago without what I had behind me, I think I'd have struggled to get to 3K. Just purely because my brain had said, I know I can do this relatively simply. And I think the difference that makes, so again, kind of going back to the discovery meeting, putting yourself through that position more often will make it, again, a lot easier as you go forward.
Yeah, I think definitely. And, you know, one of the things, I'm not saying you have to do this in a business, but one of the things that, you know, we've changed our business to be even more effective than we are is, you know, having daily role plays. Yeah, anybody who's involved in sales gets involved in daily role plays, and you can just pick one part of the discovery meeting. It might be the opening of the discovery meeting. It might be how you close, but just getting better at something, because you can then layer up. And again, I'm going to use another sporting analogy, but I've got a personal trainer. I recently changed because I'd come to the end of the journey with the previous guy, and my new personal trainer Josh said to me, "Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you to focus on doing 6 exercises really well." And he said that might take us 3 weeks, it might take us 2 months, but he said it's all about having a base. He says until you can really hone these exercises, we've not got a foundation to build on. And that, I think that is the same in sales. Get better at the basic skills, then you can build on them. And that is so important, because people try and go with the wow factor. You know, and they'll have this really polished presentation, but they want to practice it.
Yeah, it's substance over style, I guess, is what that is.
Yeah, and quite a lot of the time, I've won deals without any slides. Which there's probably some marketeers listening to this, probably horrified.
No, absolutely, and I think actually that's a nice segue into the bit I kind of touched on it briefly earlier, and I wanted to kind of finish in is especially over the last 2-3 years now, online, Zoom or whatever platform you want to use has become much more prominent. And previously, any kind of initial discussions we say were generally either on the phone or in person. Those were the two options. Now we've got this. I almost kind of see the middle between those two things is a phone call in terms of its like logistically, if nothing else. So it'd be interesting to know your thoughts on the kind of differences, the benefits, and all that kind of stuff of those platforms as a variety.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, pre-lockdown, we were already using Zoom. And in fact, I can remember, Gemma reaching out to me, your wife, and I said, we'll have our initial meeting on Zoom. And I think she's like, well, what's that? But, what I'd already learned is that for me, it is great meeting people face to face. But it says he who's like, not done his thing for the carbon footprint by traveling however many thousands of miles to New Zealand recently. But I think in terms of your sales process, I think having the initial meeting on Zoom or Microsoft Teams is fantastic because, you've got to think about the other people. You've got to think about your own travel time. In a day, I can have 4, 5, or 6 discovery meetings if I want to do. I can, with the permission of the prospect, I can record them. And it allows me to be critiqued. I can discuss with our internal coaching team what we can do. So I think it's all about setting the stall out. And what you're saying is you're valuing somebody's time. I'm valuing your time, Michael, as a prospect. And actually, if we need to do face to face, we can do. But I'm also testing you because a lot of these things in terms of delivery these days can be delivered remotely as well. Mm-hmm. So it's about putting a value in it. I think even with the biggest clients, what we do is we don't do face-to-face discovery or presentations. We'll do face-to-face delivery, but I would say 99% of our work over the last 3 or 4 years has come by using, Microsoft Teams or Zoom. So I'm a great believer in it because the benefits are it saves time. People say you can't make a connection. I thoroughly believe you can. I think that's a limiting belief.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is, isn't it, that to me, like I said, it adds another potential layer into this that you can get to know somebody. And like you said, their time is valuable as well. Doing a half an hour or 45-minute Zoom call for them, it's like we all know the benefits of videos. You join a minute before you need to and leave there and you can crack on with things. And I think that works for everybody. And I think some people are kind of reluctant to use it when it has so much potential. I think as long as you use it there's obviously the right situation. There is a situation, as you quite rightly said, where you need to jump in the car or get on a train, but it's about learning what those situations are. And I guess the question on kind of follow up from that is, what skills are slightly different, specifically around the discovery meeting, from doing it online to doing it in person?
I think the thing that sometimes people say that you don't see is people's body language totally, because you're only sort of seeing the top half of somebody. When you're presenting on Zoom. I don't think there's significantly more difference. I think it's probably you save time when you're doing it on Zoom. You don't have some of the preamble that you get. People put the kettle on, make you a cup of coffee, cup of tea. Probably the meetings sort of take longer. But I think here's the thing: we're in business to do business, and I think it comes back to being, consultative selling. And I think there's a phrase that often one of the networking organizations use, which they talk about. know, like, and trust. And I know you've heard me say this. I actually don't think it's about know, like, and trust. I think it's about know, respect, and trust. Obviously, as humans, we want people to like us. You know, that's quite a part of human nature. But actually, it's about respecting people. And you can't be friends with everybody in business. And you know, you've heard me talk about in the past, you know, relationship selling is dead, and people say, "Oh, I've got great relationships, yet they're not generating any cash." So you know, business is more personal, but I think also it's about, you know, creating that emotional connection. So I don't think the key difference is people say that you can have more of an emotional connection with somebody face to face. But I believe you can establish that emotional connection remotely as well.
I was just thinking then, actually, Pete, kind of going back to something you said very early on, actually, was around, you know, getting to the decision maker. Now, obviously, again, this often depends on the size of the business.
Yeah.
Video potentially gives you the opportunity, whilst you might not have every single discussion with the decision maker, it possibly allows you to have at least a discussion with the decision maker, because it can be done in 20 minutes or 30 minutes, as opposed to most face-to-face meetings generally kind of default or an hour at least, aren't they?
Yes, exactly.
Maybe there's that opportunity. I've not really thought about that much before, but there's actually potential opportunities there if you're positive about video.
Well, the other thing you've got as well is if there's more than one decision maker and they're not in the same location, you can accelerate the sales process because you can get them online as well.
No, that makes sense. No, absolutely. So, I guess kind of one last question to finish on around this. You know, if you were saying to anyone today who's not really done much in sales before, or they're starting their own business and they kind of struggle with how to sell, what few things would you tell them to kind of really get started on making sure that they get their discovery meeting as good as possible? Because there's no hiding fact, it will only get better over time, as we touched on earlier, by practicing. But what kind of few hints and tips can people start with?
I think the key thing is make sure that you're well researched about your prospect. You know, there's so much information you can find out about your prospect on LinkedIn, you know, Companies House, their website. I think practice, make sure you follow a sales process. There's lots of great content online. There's some hints and tips on the SalesStar website, which is www.salesstar.com. You know, there's some workbooks and free books you can download on that. But there's lots of other resources you do, and you know, make sure you follow a process. Have a process that you follow. It doesn't have to be completely scripted, but understand the questions you've got to ask, and you know, don't be frightened of qualifying people out. Don't try and take every bit of business.
No, that's great advice, Pete. So, I guess finally, if people want to, you've touched on their sales tab. If people want to get a hold of you and contact you about what the stuff that you do, what's the best way to do that?
So I think the best place to contact is obviously on LinkedIn. If you type in Pete Evans and SalesStar. If you want to email me, my email address is pete.evans@salesstar.com, and happy to connect with people and have a 30-minute chat with them if they're interested in learning more.
Fantastic, Pete. And what I'll do is I'll put those details into the notes as well, under whether it's on the video or the podcast, right, so people can find them there. And for whatever reason, I'm sure you can, but if you can't find Pete, just give us at Northern Affinity a shout, and we'll point you in the right direction. So as ever, Pete, we've done these a few times and had different discussions. So thank you. I mean, there's so much value there. You might have noticed I haven't been making some notes as we go through that. So you've given me things to add to my to-do list, which I'm not sure I wanted, but you have done anyway, Pete.
Fantastic. Well, that's great. I really enjoyed it, Michael, and thanks for inviting us on today.
Thank you very much, Pete.
You're welcome.
I hope you enjoyed this chat today, and like me, you learned something new from our wonderful expert. So if you'd like to hear from more of our sessions, please subscribe on whatever platform that you get your podcast from to hear more. And also, we'd love to meet you at some point at one of our upcoming events. The Northern Affinity hold events all across the north of England, and we'd love to meet new people and have guests along, so please come along and check out our website or all the details in the show notes. Thank you very much for listening, and see you next time.